Oh, hello and welcome to day 3 of hashtag everyone can. Today, we have 3 amazing people joining us for our Everyone Can series. With us, first and foremost, I am our host and moderator, Jeremy Bloom. I am the founder and chief mentor of ohhello.io. We will be launching this summer. We have 3 esteemed colleagues, friends, and guests joining this episode specifically. And I'd like to go around the horn and introduce each of you, and then please jump in. With us today, we have Larissa, we have Akash, and we have Andrea. Larissa, why don't you tell us who you are? Who do we have the pleasure of speaking with? Oh, hello!
I am a recruiter. I've been doing this for about 15 years, specifically this entire time have always been focused in digital marketing and advertising. That's my niche and the space that I've always been in. Live out in the Bay Area now, but actually originally an East Coaster. So I've recruited on both coasts and as well as right down the middle.
Right down the middle.
Talking
That's
about
what we like to hear.
Chicago as well.
Awesome. Next up, how about Andrea?
Hi, Andrea Javer, Chicago-based marketer. I have 20 plus years of experience in integrated media. I've done big business, agency, client side, and I've been a consultant for the last several years, and I'm focused on finding my next great permanent role right now.
Oh, that's perfect that you're with us today. And next, Akash.
Thanks. Oh, hello.
Oh, hello.
I love that. Yeah, my name is Akash Pathak. I'm also Chicagoland area. I've been in marketing for about 20 years, and I focused a lot on digital transformation and a bit of brand work as well. So right now I'm at Potbelly's, a locally founded restaurant, and I'm heading up some of their digital work, and I'm super excited to be here.
Fantastic. Well, this is going to be a great session for the next 25, 30 minutes. Really excited for the 3 of you to be here. So for everyone watching, for everyone listening, viewing, whether you're live streaming through YouTube, LinkedIn, or through Twitter, thank you for being here. Today, we're going to be talking about a few different topics. First and foremost, marketers are marketing themselves right now, aren't they? Well, there's a reason for that. As we all know, there has been a tumultuous upheaval of marketing, advertising, and tech-related roles where over 500,000 roles have been essentially decimated over the past 6 months. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to start OHello, to create connectivity and a community behind so many great minds. And I think it's really important as we're all going through these career shifts and constantly having to, for those of us that are in marketing, market a product, market a service, but we have to remember that we are people behind those products and services. And we do so much work to service the customer and to make sure that they have a wonderful experience. We sometimes forget about marketing ourselves. So with that said, I thought it would be really helpful to start off with, especially with Akash, who went through for a couple months, he was let go from, went through a RIF, a company went through a RIF. Instead of me telling your story, how about you tell your story and we'll go from there?
That sounds good. Yeah. I've been through the layoff cycle, and it's disorienting, right? There's a lot of different emotions that come up, and I've posted about this on LinkedIn, and so I'm a big music fan, so I used a Bob Dylan song to kind of talk about it, and it's the song "Don't Think Twice, It's All Right" is one of the lines that he says, and he's basically talking about a breakup, and so but there are very simple analogies to a job. And I don't know how I can't. I think Larissa's going to be much more qualified to talk about how do you land that next gig, right? So yeah. I'm going to let her talk about that. But what my big thing right now is that there are a few things that you can do personally, right? And I'll start with just one. I think that employment has changed, specifically within marketing. when you're, let's say, an HR professional or a finance professional, a lot of positions can be extracted from one company and placed into another company, and they are fairly apples to apples. Marketing, and this was actually talked about on several current podcasts from current CMOs, is different. You can be extracted from a company, you can be in a company, make a conscious move, and it can be a very different type of position. So the theory, and I'm backed by a few really smart people in the industry on this, is that I think marketers have to look at it as, you're not working necessarily, you're working for a brand, but the brand is you. The value you bring is the value you bring to that employer to reach their goals. And a lot of us grew up in generations where our parents, my parents specifically, worked for pretty big organizations for, let's say, 20 years, 27 years, whatever it is. And their brand was partially intermixed with these big companies, even if the company changed names, which in my mom's case it did. But I think today, as a marketer, we have to take care of our brand, and then we have to adjust our value as the market changes to be competitive with where we can drive results for different employers. And I think that's the shift that's going on. So the last thing I'll say on that is that where you can go to learn more about it, Rashad Tobacco Walla has been talking about future of work in a couple of posts. Yep. Fantastic. Professor Scott Galloway, we all love him, right? He's been talking about this as well. Information workers, it is shifting, and you just have to be smart about it. There's nothing you can do because you can't control it. So the last point I'll make about layoffs, et cetera, is you have to take care of yourself. It is disorienting, but you have to take care of you. And the ways to do it are through self-compassion. And I'll get to some specific resources on that as well later on in the talk. But I just want to note here, you have to take care of yourself. Self-compassion is critical. And there's massive bodies of work that show it is super beneficial to you. But the first point, I think, is the one I just want to make here, which is you are the brand. The value you bring is what you need to work on and continue to hone as the industry changes. And it has to change from job to job as well.
Powerful. Well said. Andrea, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, Akash, I couldn't agree more with many of the points you made. I'm a huge Rashad Tobacco Walla fan as well. Love his Substack every week on Sundays. It's awesome. But I'm going to take what you said and with a slightly different angle, which more specifically, how do you take care of yourself during a time when the job market is really challenging? Having been through the layoff cycle, it is disorienting. That's a wonderful word to describe it. I think what's been really critical for me, in the beginning, so my riff was in early 2020, like 5 weeks before we knew the pandemic was happening. And, frankly, I couldn't have planned anything better. I was turning work away in the early days of 2020 because organizations were scared to hire senior leadership and they needed people, right? So I'm turning work away and I've had wonderful opportunities. And then 2023 hits. And for some reason, it has been a really big struggle to find meaningful consulting work as well as meaningful permanent roles where you don't get ghosted by the recruiter / no offense to Larissa, I'm sure you don't do that to candidates, but sometimes from internal HR teams or from, I've been through 3 interviews, did a case study, haven't heard anything, and it's been 8 weeks, so there's horror stories in terms of, being in it. But what I'll say specifically that I think has been really paramount for me is first and foremost to remain positive by any means necessary. So for me, I very consciously think through, this is not because I'm not struggling because I lack skill or connection with people or that I'm not working hard enough. It's that it's just not the right time for me right now. And I'm positive that in the future, I'm going to find something wonderful and it'll be worth the wait. I say to people who are looking for jobs right now, don't only look for a job, like for sure, spend dedicated time every day. But it has been really critical for me to make sure that when I'm networking with people, it's to make authentic connections. It's not always about me and what I'm trying to do. It's very much about, for every 10 people you meet with in a 2-week period or whatever it might be, maybe one person has something to do that can help you. But if you can help 9 other people, that's actually the win because it's building productive relationships. the other piece for me that's been really critical to stay positive and optimistic is, again, if I'm not only looking for a job, what else am I doing? I've had a book inside of me for the last 10 years that I haven't really gotten out. I started writing. I've been working on a novel now for the last 3 years. It's not business related, but it's so special to me and something that I feel accomplished plugging in and writing every day. And then the other thing I started doing, which is really funny, I never in a million years thought I would do this. A few months ago, I started following a lot of like refurbishers on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. And I decided to get this big cedar dresser I had forever, took it into my garage. I figured out how to strip it, sand it, paint it, the whole thing. And sort of, so it's like through these other hobbies and interests, I think I'm becoming even more well-rounded and thinking of things differently as I'm preparing myself for my next great permanent role.
Love that. Love that. Love the refurbishing and just developing other passions and projects. Andrea is going to be a guest on a future pod we recorded a couple weeks back, and you were telling me about the novel, and I'm super excited for you because it's nice to be able to take a bit of time to just re-engage with just other components of oneself. And so thank you for sharing that, and also for developing additional skills, because as you're marketing and helping other people market, it really helps to be able to have essentially different tools that you can, pull out of your tool shed, or arrows from your quiver, so to speak. I want to throw this over to our friend on the West Coast. So Larissa, tell us from your perspective as an executive recruiter within tech, marketing, advertising, media, SaaS. You have an immensely large network. You are dealing with a lot of people. They're asking you for advice all the time. Let's hear it.
Yeah, and in truth, I feel for you, Andrea, right? I mean, it is a wild, wild ride right now. And honestly, a lot of what you're saying even just rings true personally. It's where is our next job going to come from? Like, where is, right? And even questioning like, oh gosh, am I doing something wrong as a recruiter? And I think we're all feeling similarly. 2023 isn't our best year. We thought 2020 was not going to be our best, but right, it turns out 2023 maybe not our best year. But I love that you're trying to reinvent yourself a little bit, Andrea. Even just sharing some personal pieces about yourself, that's what makes you stand out. I'm going to remember you now, not because, okay, yes, she's in marketing, but I'm going to remember that she's writing a novel, that she's been doing, right? Like you've got some fun side projects, which I really feel that, I mean, it makes us human, right? It creates that sort of personal connection. As I was kind of thinking through this and how are people, how do you pivot yourself, and how are you reinventing yourself, and how are marketers marketing themselves, right? What do we do with that? And so, part of that is, I think, thinking about how are you marketing yourself? What is your narrative? I think, in the past, candidates would tend to, I don't want to say cling, but right, they think about, okay, their most prestigious company they've worked for, or the most well-known company they've worked for, and that's what they would start with as they would pitch themselves. And really encourage everyone to think about sort of pivoting that thought process and really coming up with a narrative of what do you want to see for the future for yourself. Instead of leading with who you were, leading with who do you want to be? I think we all have sort of our elevator pitch, but really thinking about what is that when you're going into that first round of interviews, or maybe you're going to a consulting gig, whatever that might be, forgetting about your past and really being, you can decide your narrative, you can decide your future, and coming with that front. I would say too, I mean, it's a scary time, but I think we're all being forced a little bit to pivot on some level, and building a little bit of that risk tolerance. I think it's so easy to just stay in your comfort zone. It's warm, it's cozy, right? But really thinking about like small steps, maybe reaching out to connections on LinkedIn, saying it out loud, right? Like, this is my intentions. This is what I want to do next. This is what I want, right? Like, I think the power of putting it out into the universe is everything. So, just those little, right? Like, you don't have to move across the country. You don't have to sell your house, right? Like, it doesn't have to be like huge risks, but just little ones to get you to where you want to be. And the last piece, and you guys have talked about this also, and so important, is leaning on your network. Don't be afraid to ask for support. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to share your story with everyone you meet. You just never know. I met somebody last week that she was like, "You will not believe that I just found my next job from somebody I met in 6th grade." Like, is not right. Not in the industry, not in my network, really. Like, somebody that I happened to go home to see my family and came across this person, and that's how I found my next job.
Oh my gosh, Larissa, I have to say really quick, I met a woman in a fitting room at a boutique in Lincoln Square when I was shopping. A friend of mine who's a stylist had an event. And anyway, I was in a fitting room chatting with her. She's asking me about the job search. I'm very open with her, telling her, oh, it's been a tough market. And she's like, what are you looking for again? Maybe I know people. Woman in the fitting room next to me said, hey, I'm a creative. I'm based here in Chicago. We should talk. We've ended up having 2 conversations in the last month, and she has introduced me to several people that have, again, it's just, it is building that network. And I think part of it, it's sometimes hard to be really authentic with where you're at, to say to someone, it sucks right now. I'm trying really hard to put myself out there. And sometimes it feels bad, but you know what? This is where you are. This is, you got to be honest about where you are and be open to meeting people in really alternative ways. I love that. 6th grade and in a fitting room. It happens everywhere.
That's awesome.
Great call. That's how Akash and I reunited. We had met at a couple different conferences over the years, and he shot me a note probably 2 years back, just saying like, hey, I really like what you post on LinkedIn. I'd love to just re-engage and just talk like we have in the past. And then from there, we developed a great friendship. We went out to lunch a couple of weeks ago, and it just showcases the importance of network and just how your network is your brand. It's part of your authentic self. It's part of your identity. I really love the fact that you had mentioned, Larissa, just stop. My advice to anyone and everyone, don't worry about what you did in the past. Like, everyone can see that on LinkedIn. They can see it on your resume. What are you going to do in the future? How are you going to keep on moving? How are you going to keep on innovating? To me, that's more important than anything. Like, I can say I have this accomplishment and that accomplishment. No one gives a shit. No one cares. They want to know, like, what can I do for them in the future? What can you do for me tomorrow? And I think that that's super relevant. With that said, I think that gets us to the next point. Loyalty. So having 2 marketers here, I wanted to talk about, I thought it would be helpful to talk about just how important customer loyalty, brand loyalty is. And then from there, I think we can slowly pivot to employee-employer loyalty because of how we kicked off the conversation. So from a brand loyalty perspective, we've seen some PR steps and missteps from some major brands. Everyone has seen it with, we can open Pandora's box and call out different brands, or we can keep it low key. It's up to you guys. But I would love to kick this over to you, Akash, as someone who leads loyalty, who leads marketing for a wonderfully tasty company. So with that said, go for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting time, right? I think for a lot of us, like, we've had to figure out acquisition for many years, right? And we've made some good ways there. I think what's happening now with loyalty is that when the customer price index starts to kind of get a little bit off, what you would say is like a good trajectory, right? Like, August was terrible. Prices just went crazy, and energy, food, and I'm not an economist, so I'm going to miss a couple. But the point is, it really hurt customers, right? And it hurt them in a bad way. It hurt them in a way where they're not even buying prescriptions, right? Like, there was like some real things they had to make choices on. And so I think with economic uncertainty, brand loyalty is important, right? It comes down to one word to me, which is value. If you have, and value often can be some people are like, oh, well, value, that's like, I can get something for, $1, but that's not value necessarily. Value is a big word. It can mean, I paid $10, but I got a lot for it. And maybe I had to stretch a little bit to buy it, but I got so much and it's such great quality. Or it can mean $1, right? It can kind of flex to that. So I think a lot of what we need to ask ourselves in marketing is, what's our value equation to the customer? Is it strong? Like, are they getting a lot for what we do? Are we thinking about them first? Because in these environments, and right now, frankly, like, we may not have seen the worst, right? Like, it seems to be going okay. We don't know what's happening. There's some uncertainty. They're spending a little bit less. Discretionary spending is a little bit down, but it's not horrible. This is a great time to build that loyalty so that if it does go that way, you have those customers, with you. They know they can trust you for value, and value in a big sense, not just this really small, narrow sense. So that's the 2 cents I can give, and that's what I've been thinking about. So hopefully that's helpful.
I'd also build on that, Akash. It's value is such a critical word. And I think a way to build that trust with consumers is consistency and messaging. And that can be really tricky when you're trying to find new pockets of consumer growth. I don't want to call out brands here. I did work in the beer category all of 2022. And we've seen, some of the controversy with divisive topics that are out there in the political sphere, really, creating a lot of backlash in the category. And I feel for those people. I feel for marketers who are trying to find new pockets of growth and doing it in authentic ways to the brand. Because I think as a brand, you should be able to communicate your values authentically to new consumer groups without backlash, without kind of upsetting, the other side. But unfortunately, that's not always the case, especially with some of these really deep-seated controversial topics that are out there just in the lexicon today. But I do think, remaining really consistent to what the brand stands for year over year, time after time. A lot of marketers, I think, I've worked in organizations who have the staying power to really commit to a brand positioning, right? I mean, think about, Corona beer, right? Corona has been about the beach forever, right? For 20 years, it's been about different expressions of it, right? You can have Andy Samberg and Snoop Dogg and Bad Bunny and whoever, but it's always that mentality of relaxation, chill out, and I think what's wonderful about that brand, and there's lots of brands who do consistency well, but this brand is so consistent and true to its roots that when it does expand out and do Pride, right? And Corona does a lot with Pride Month this month. They do it in a way that's really true to messaging. And so I think that there are ways, to build loyalty and value. And I do think a lot of that is about consistency so that consumers of all groups in many different forms know exactly who you are and what to expect from you as a brand.
I love that you just brought that up, Andrea. Thank you for bringing up a few different brands. Super relevant. I noticed in our chat there are a couple different fans that have asked for advice or tips, tricks. So I want to cover those before we hit on Larissa going and speaking about employee-employer loyalty, because I think that's really important for this session too. And if we go a few minutes over, totally fine. Are you guys okay to go a few minutes over? Okay, we'll go about 5 minutes over or so. So Richard Irving, who I had the pleasure of working with previously, said that what Larissa said was super, super helpful. So just wanted to call that out. He oversaw creative at Abercrombie and Fitch and Hollister, some amazing brands. So thank you, Richard, for watching. And then Tom Reardon, a very great friend for many years. He loves networking in a post-COVID world, but it just seems more difficult. Any tips or tricks from our panel?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can speak just personally. I have just been really intentional about it. I have specific, I think this sort of work. I mean, we're all sitting at home, all four of us on here, it looks like, right? We're all sitting at home.
Yeah.
So you really have to be intentional about getting yourself out there. And I've said just that, right? We're all sitting at home. We're dying for some of that connection. Hey, would you be open to getting a coffee together? Would you be open to get lunch or a drink after work? I'll come to you, right? Like I'll make it easy. It's a little bit different when you're a recruiter, right? But in truth, a lot of it is personal, right? Like I want to know what's going on in the market. I want to make sure I'm staying relevant. And so I think it's more, you have to be more intentional. It's not as easy as just, there's a meetup down the street after work, or a happy hour after work, right? It's just not as easy as it used to be. So that's how I found, different ways to be able to network, at least in person. I will say, again, I'm a recruiter, so people are hitting me up left and right, right? I mean, I think that you feel more comfortable reaching out to a recruiter. But I truly encourage folks to reach out to their network, and people want to help people.
Totally.
Really, right? Like just in trends, like that is what's in our bodies, right? Like we want to help each other. We want to see each other succeed. And I guarantee you, just putting yourself out there, and it might feel a little uncomfortable, but I guarantee you'll get that response back and some support.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think part of it also is like, trust yourself. There's a meditation on Peloton where the instructor says, I trust myself, I trust my path, I trust my process. Again, this is not super deep, right? Like I don't know anyone who's, I'm just doing what I can, right, as a human.
Just going for a cardio.
Exactly. Then I did some cardio. It was great. So anyway, the point is, that question, I would say, yourself. If you feel like you need to get out of the house, state it. So like I had a good friend I connected with a while ago. We were just texting like, hey, let's meet up. And I'm like, okay, like my schedule's kind of crazy that day. Do you mind if we do a Zoom call? He's like, I'm zoomed out. Like, that's it. There wasn't anything else in the text. And I'm like, sounds good. All right. So then, we're at Hoxton, we had some coffee or whatever. So it'll be fine. Trust yourself. And if the connection is there and you have this great network, which I imagine everybody does, I know they do, like Larissa said, it'll just happen. So just say like, you know what, I'm kind of zoomed out right now. I need to get out of the house. I guarantee you a lot of people will come back and be like, you know what, you're right. Like as soon as he wrote me that, I'm like, I'm zoomed out too. You know what I mean? And then it was kind of done, at that point.
Yeah.
Awesome.
For myself, I'm lucky to have extreme extroversion. So I consider most places I go an opportunity to meet new people and talk and make new connections. So you got to just think about whether you're at the gym or at the grocery store. I don't know, like wherever you are, I think it's just an opportunity to put yourself out in the world. And I think so, for those who don't feel as extroverted, maybe try to tap into that part of yourself that, can spark up a conversation, get the courage to do so. Because I think Akash and Larissa, you both said this, people want to help you. It's not that people are here to try to, put you down. I mean, people really want to help you. So you just have to speak up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With the next few minutes, would love to hear your collective 2 cents on employee-employer relations and loyalty. Why don't we kick it off with Larissa? Why don't you just walk through as an executive recruiter, just what you're seeing and some tips and tricks, and then Akash and Andrea will also jump in.
Yeah. I'll say too, Jeremy, yesterday I was like, I don't know, brand loyalty versus employee-employer role. At the end of the day, it's all the same. Well, right?
So with you. I'm so with you.
We're thinking about the value that we're providing to let's just say at Potbelly, right? It's what is the value that we're providing? Well, what is the value you're providing your employees? And I think it doesn't. Companies have to think about their distinctive story and how they're standing out in the market and how they're selling themselves to their customers, but it's the same thing internally. And I think when we think about, Andrea, you were sharing, I think a little bit more about culture and Corona has really stayed, 20 plus years of really knowing who they are and have stuck with that. Companies have to do that internally too. They need to be thinking about, if this is the culture that we want, then you have to be intentional about maintaining that, even through layoffs and even through all of the crazy changes that have happened. Even if you're lucky enough to have not had any layoffs at your company, I guarantee that the employees are still feeling real wonky, right? We're all a little scared of what's happening. So I think when we think about what the past has done to us, I think we've all found that 2020, 2021 allowed employees to have far more of a voice. 10 years ago, I mean, I would have loved to have been working from home, but I would have never asked for it. It wasn't a thing, right? Like it was. But I think employees have now found that voice to really be able to speak up. DEI, we know, I mean, it's not that no one cared 10 years ago. It just you didn't have that voice to feel that as an employee, I could say, I'm not happy with this and I want this to change. And now we know that we can say, this is important to me. And I want to be part of an organization that it has a similar value to what I have. So I think this sort of idea of loyalty is totally different. Like Kasha's right parents and have stayed in the same company 20 plus years. Well, we've learned that if we want to make more money and we want to continue to grow in our career, for the most part, we're going to have to switch jobs to make that happen. But from an employer's perspective, they should be thinking about career pathing. They should be thinking about mental health. They should be thinking about DEI. And right now, because the focus has shifted, most companies are right. They're they're trying to make sure that they're meeting their bottom line and they're potentially cutting some costs. But what that is also going to mean is there's going to be turnover. And I think right now we're seeing, for the most part, employees are kind of keeping their head down. If you have a job, you feel like, oh, I should just be happy I have one, even if I don't align with the culture, or I don't align with the beliefs of this company. But I guarantee as things start to turn around, you're going to see a lot more movement. I listened to a podcast yesterday that was saying that 28% of talent are very likely to leave their employer in the next 12 months. I mean, that's wow. Like a third of all. And to be honest with you, if we listened to that probably in 2021, that probably was double that.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to build, Larissa. So there's a great professor out of Stanford, their graduate school in business. And I read a couple of his books, and essentially what he gets after is that employee engagement has never been a predictor of stock market success. And then he just goes in a couple bunch of different directions. So like we all know, culture eats strategy, and then culture drives incredible return, right? So that was like a great quote by Drucker. But this professor goes into 2 books and actually dissects it and tells you how to do it. The point of the matter is that culture will succeed. And so as you're out there, you're assessing these different things, you're spot on. You might be in a place where like this feels like a coercive culture, super prescriptive, not, that company probably over the 10-year long term probably isn't going to do as well as a company that has a better culture, understands how people add value, gives them some power to drive the value, and then creates great teamwork and collaboration to drive it. And that's the long view. And I think that's what we have to sometimes do with our careers, is take a step back and say, look, here's these 2-3 years here, here's this 3 years here, whatever. At the end of the day, I'm going to eventually work for a company that has a right view. They're going to create incredible shareholder, incredible employee value. I'm going to be on that ride, and we're going to rock it. And that's life. You got to go into those places and just know it. And I'm just going to give props to one company that is trying to change the world through AI with this, that I met in my journeys, and they're called KindWorks AI. And they're publishing studies on how being kind, developing collaboration, being a culture that is good to each other and works together actually creates better returns than those other companies. They're out there, they're Chicago-based, they're working with huge firms. This is fact. So that's a perspective we need to have, and everybody out there will find those places. And I know that, over time, we'll succeed as a culture that way.
That's just phenomenal, isn't it? Kindness matters so much, especially in culture, right? But it's the simple things. Like, I think the human truths that we forget about sometimes when we're in the thick of the day-to-day job and we're in the muck and, just trying to get stuff out the door and off your desk, and whoever you're managing is having problems and you're trying to remove barriers. But I think it's about, it's about kindness. And also I think relationship-based cultures are the ones that really win in the long term. And I do think it has to start at the very top, because you can have one leader on your executive team that kind of foils all efforts for an inclusive, empowered culture if they're making all the decisions, right? For example. So I do think it is about the leadership team being involved with what are those initiatives, what do we stand for as a company, and making sure that's not for the next 3 years, that's for the next 30. That's, this is what we want to do, and we're going to be committed to it, to Larissa's point, through layoffs. We're going to have values, and we're going to state those values and live those values from the top down. And I think that's really important.
Well said. Well, to wrap this up, would love to go around the horn and get a quick sentence or two of parting words, wisdom that you can drop, knowledge nuggets, whatever phrase you want to use, to each of you. So, Andrea, since you just finished up, let's have you what's your parting advice?
My parting advice is just be you and put out authentic, positive energy, and you are going to attract in so many people into your life, into your network, that's going to continue to help you thrive and help you find the next great place you need to be.
Awesome. Thank you. Akash.
Well, I'm going to quote my Peloton meditation instructor. Trust yourself, trust your path, trust your process. And I agree with Andrea. Take the long view. This is one time. This is not your life. This is the long view. You have a long life to live, and you have a lot of impact to give to the world.
Mm-hmm.
So well said. Mm-hmm. Larissa.
I think probably along both of Akash and Andrea, right? Like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Take the risk, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to support in any way I can.
Well, thank you to the three of you for being part of #EveryoneCan. Thank you for being part of Oh Hello. The purpose of this was to provide guidance, advice, connectivity, and we're excited for day 4, which is tomorrow, with fractional marketers talking about just the fractional C-suite. And then on Monday, we're going to be talking about who is Tim? What is Tim? So essentially tracking, identity, measurement. And then we have some others that are in the works for later next week, which, whether or not we continue it, everyone can as the theme. This is starting to be a fun little outlet for a lot of people. So again, thank you, the three of you. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that took the time during your break in between meetings, or while you're doing some other meetings watching this. We really appreciate it, and we recorded it for those that missed. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy.
Bye. Thanks, Jeremy.
Oh, goodbye.